Hey everyone, Randy Harrington here. Do you guys remember the video I did about Bullet Maker, Doug Bilby, and all the happenings going on around his property there by Spencer Creek off of Lake Oolaga in Oklahoma? Well, I ran across a short video or a audio interview that I did with him, so you can actually hear from his own voice some of the going ons there at his property. So enjoy.
The person we're going to be talking with tonight, a very, very dear friend of mine. And for 2 years, I've known this gentleman. And when I first met him, I started out investigating his property and talking to the neighbors and the locals. And this man has got a very exciting place. And but above all that, above all the research that's going on there, and the fascinating times that I've spent there, and the adrenaline rushes that I've had, the best thing that I've come out of his place so far is knowing him and calling him my best friend. So I'm glad to have you here. How's it going, Doug?
Oh, pretty good there, Randy. I'll owe you another $100 now for saying those nice things about me. But I'm doing very, very well. I'm just trying to thaw out from that cold weather we've had today.
Oh, well, I was down there last month to help you dig out there from that ice storm and the days and days without electricity, and so I know what you're talking about. What I'd like to do is I'd just like to let you take over the floor here, Bullet, if you would, and just kind of give us an overview of how things first started there at your property, and gave you any indication that there were things to be watching for out there.
Absolutely, Randy. I would like to welcome everyone that's listening in tonight, and if those that are not listening in, we'll give them a call and tell them to get on here because they're going to learn some stuff about Bigfoot tonight. I've been doing this now for 22 years. My first encounter was I told about when I was a small child and had my very first encounter, which was quite traumatic for me at a young age of 9 years old. But, however, I've had several encounters out here when I moved out here 22 years ago. So, therefore, I consider I've been hunting these things for the past 22 years. Of course, as we've all found out, it's best to hunt them, I think, on a full moon night, and guess what? We are having a full moon night as we talk. But I've had several encounters. I think you'll be pleasantly entertained by some of the facts that I have found out about these most mysterious creatures.
Hey, Dad, do you mind if I go ahead? I want to go ahead and interject this in there for our listeners. When Bullet says a Bigfoot hunt, that's just what we've come to call these things over the years. They may have started out as being an actual hunt, but now he calls it a hunt when we're just out there doing research. We're not always out there, in that manner. So just wanted it to be clear that when he says a Bigfoot hunt, that just means it's out there looking for Bigfoot.
Absolutely, absolutely, Randy. When we say hunt, well, I'm a hunter, so I go ahead and say I'm hunting these creatures, but we're actually trying to gather some information on them, if at all possible. And one thing that I have came to the conclusion of from 22 years of hunting these creatures, and let me rephrase that again. I've been looking at these creatures, hunting them for 22 years, and there's a lot of people that hear my stories and they'll go, "Gee, that guy is full of it. He sees them every time he turns around." No, that is far from the truth. The fact is, I've got 22 years. That's a long time frame. I've got a lot of stories, but I do not see them every time I go out. But the local person would think that I see them just by stepping out my back door, and that is not the case. So, Randy, where would you like me to start at?
Well, I'd actually like to go ahead and just run something by you that I listened to today. I bought a video down, or a DVD down at the Honubby conference this past year from a lady named Esther, who's been doing research, and the DVD is called Bigfooting in Oklahoma. And I was watching it today, and there was a gentleman on there that she was interviewing from the conference the year before in Honubby, and he was talking about being a Vietnam vet and setting up on the side of the mountain and having an animal come walking down the hill before daylight, and sounded like it was on two legs. And he could understand that the animal must have sensed that he was there, because it veered off the trail and went down an almost straight drop off, very tough to get down, but it just went straight down this cliff area and then continued walking. And it reminded me of a story that just happened this past hunting season with Bullet up at stand number 8 or 8.5. And he says that he heard something up on the ridge behind him, but the animal or whatever it was went straight over the cliff. And, you know, the cliffs around Bullet's place are anywhere from 50 to 75, 80 feet, you know, drop-offs. And so I just wanted to tell you that other people are hearing some of the same things, you know. So when Bullet said that this animal must have dropped off the side of the cliff there and continued on to avoid coming by him in the stand, well, you can believe it, because, you know, here's somebody else from down in the Kiamichi area reporting the same thing. And that's what happened today, but I didn't want to detract from Bullet starting, you know, from where he was going to start on his stories.
Well, let me touch on that very story there, Randy. Yes, you're correct. It was stand number 5 is the stand it was. And for the listeners out there, I've been selling deer leases for the past 8 years. I never tell my clients that we have big feet out here. I let them tell me. So therefore, at the end of the day, a client is checking out and he will make some comment about a strange sound or a strange creature that he saw, and they usually don't come back. It scares them so bad. But I never tell them about the Bigfoots. Therefore, when they tell me a sighting that they had, I know that what they saw was a Bigfoot from the description. The stand number 5 is down at one end of my property up on the hill. My stands are numbered 1 through 12 in a clockwise position in numerical order. Well, stand number 5, I hunted this past deer season, 2007, and behind me was sheer cliffs, position in numerical order. Well, stand number 5, I hunted this past deer season, 2007, and behind me was sheer cliffs. Like Randy was saying, some of these cliffs are 50, 75, some are 130-foot sheer drop-off. And this one cliff behind me was one of those 130-foot drop-off sheer cliffs. It was about 30 yards on my back side. I wasn't worried about a deer coming in behind me. I am deer hunting, by the way. I'm not Bigfoot hunting, but when I deer hunt, I am also Bigfoot hunting, because I see these creatures during the deer season. There's another thought on that pattern right there. But along about sundown, I saw no deer, but I'm going to stay till dark. And approximately about 15 minutes past legal shooting time, whenever the sun is set and there's not enough light to really see a deer, I hear this motion behind me. It kind of surprised me, because I'd been sitting there on that 5-tower stand for probably 4 to 5 hours. There was no motions behind me, no sounds, nothing. And I will describe behind me being a lot of scrub oaks and thorn trees, small 7, 8 foot tall, kind of brushy area. All of a sudden, I hear this moving around back there, and a couple of grunts like, and I jerked around because it just surprised the heck out of me. Now again, remember, it's getting pretty dark, and I cannot make out a visual past 15 yards. Beyond that, it's completely washed out in black. But something was moving back there, and it was pretty hostile. A big something, a big-bodied something or another, grunting, sort of like a monkey grunt. And I trained my whole senses on that area, using my peripheral vision, trying to pierce the darkness of the woods back there. I didn't have my night vision with me. All I had was my binoculars and the rifle, the scope on my rifle, which was, of course, totally worthless at this point. It seemed like eternity, but it was probably 15 minutes of duration of total silence. I knew this thing, creature, whatever, was there, because he had to walk by me to get out of there. Now, if he did walk by me, I would definitely see a form. Even though it was dark, I would be able to see a form. Well, this thing went down that cliff, that sheer drop-off, 130 foot. And the reason I know he went down it is because there was branches being pulled loose, as it was if he was letting himself down the scale side of that cliff. And I heard.
And Bill, let me describe to people. I've walked the base of those cliffs when I've been there doing my research, and the base of these cliffs, even though it may be 130 feet down to the ground, you've got a lot of boulders that have worked themselves loose and tumbled down the sides of these canyon walls, and there's a lot of shale and things like that which actually kind of pile up at the bottom so that it might drop down 50 feet or so, and then it starts to slope at the bottom because of all the buildup of shale and stuff tumbling down the walls. So, I mean, I don't want people to think that an animal will take an absolute 130-foot drop, but they could actually scoot down these walls, and by the time they get to the bottom, it would be more of a slide rather than a straight drop. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Randy.
Yeah, and I also want to say that I like to rack my brain. You know, I spent years and years reading thousands of reports before I even stepped foot in the woods because trying to get an understanding of these animals. And I remember reading a report, you know, I can't say if it was in Northern California or Washington, but there were some Boy Scouts that were walking after dark with some girls, and they all had flashlights, and they walked by this water tower. And I remember they said that somebody shined a flashlight at the top of this water tower, which I'm assuming 30, 40 feet up, and there was something peering over the platform at them, and they all started shining their light up there. And when they did that, this animal jumped off the far side, which would have been, you know, a good 40-foot drop, and they said it hit the ground running. So if you take reports like that, heights, you know, if that animal can jump 40 feet and hit the ground running, then it's not too far-fetched to believe that they could drop off the sides of some of these cliffs.
Absolutely, and
you know, and also Bullet was saying how there's been some hunters in the past. And, you know, and when you're thinking about 22 years of paid leases, many guys every year, and he has had some hunters leave, but he also has hunters who have gotten excited, who have gotten bitten by the Bigfoot bug, and when they realize what's going on out there and what is actually throwing stuff at their tree stands or hollering at them or shaking trees, they come back, and then they want to start coming back after dark and setting up in those tree stands. So not everybody gets scared, but some of them actually want to come back and start to become researchers.
Absolutely, the creature that night that scaled down that 130-foot cliff. I heard plants, smaller scrub oaks, on the side of those cliffs. Trees will grow out of the sides, so will the root system. Now, what bewildered me was I sat confidently in that stand, thinking there was nothing behind me, nothing humanly possible that could have been behind me. And then when it got dark, of course, the creature started grunting and tearing trees up, literally, and then he backed down the back side, climbed down it. And that just freaked me out because the fact that even though you think they're not in a particular area, they are. Now, there's a possibility he could have been sleeping there. And I've told Randy about this spot several times that would be a very excellent observation post because it comes out on the tip of that canyon, and you can see for miles up and down those canyons anything moving at all. You can pinpoint it with astounding accuracy, especially with night vision. However, I never dreamed in my wildest thoughts that there was a creature there that night. He could have been watching me the whole time. He could have scaled that cliff and then saw me and got angry, or the other possibility was he was sleeping in that thick clump of stunted trees and woke up to see me looking around like a squirrel on a tree knot, and then got angry.
Yeah, and incidentally, that same strip pit at the base of that cliff is where you had a couple of hunters that came out there one day to go fishing and came up to your house and saw a couple of footprints down there, and they skedaddled after that.
Yes, that's correct. I had Ken and Ernie, two of my clients. They're very keyed up on this Bigfoot thing now, and they come out in the summertime to fish those strip pits. It's very hard to get to those strip pits. You have to be under 30 years old to get down there, I guarantee you. I used to go down there all the time 22 years ago. I can still get down there to this day. However, by the time I got falling down the cliff and picking the rocks out of my eardrums in my pocket, it would be very hard to get back up. I'm 62 now. But they was down there, they went down to fish and instantly came upon these huge tracks on the side of the strip pit and back of this very point that I was telling you about. They came out of there. This was in August, by the way. They were covered in perspiration and exhausted. And I said, gee, guys, did you catch a lot of fish? You weren't down there very long. And that's when they told me about the footprints. And they said they were fresh, and it scared them, and they left. I asked them, would they take some plaster Paris down there to catch me some tracks? And they said, no way.
And to give everybody an idea just how difficult it is, even when you're on the downside of that, trying to skirt along that strip pit, I believe we've got some pictures on Bullet's threads where another researcher met me there for a weekend, and we went in that direction around the strip pits, and it was my first time walking in that way, and I've got pictures of this researcher exhausted, sitting on the ground with his feet stuck in the mud, and just to give you an idea of how rough it is traveling through there.
Oh, absolutely. It's an exhaustive hike through there. Like I was saying earlier, when I first moved out here, I was in really good shape. So I don't know if old age caught up with me or if tromping these hills has made me an old man before my times. However, I would like to point out that there is a lot of sightings out here, especially around these strip pits and these hills. Another quick story is that one of my neighbors, which is at that time was 23 years old. In fact, this was just a couple of years ago. He came up to my house, and we were visiting, and he had been kind of hitting the moonshine, if you know what I mean. And he told me that he had been fishing down there one day, and he smiled because he was on my property, and he knows how I'm very protective of my property. And he said he had a nice stringer of fish, and he was down at that strip pit, and he was sitting there enjoying the nice breeze and catching a lot of fish. And the sun was starting to set, and he heard something, or he felt a presence up on top of him, up on this cliff, up above his head. He turned around and saw this rather large man. All he could see was a black silhouette, and he thought it was a trespasser. Now, he is one of my neighbors, but out here we're all hillbillies, and we'll fight and cuss each other. But you've heard the old saying, don't let an outsider come in and try that, because we'll whoop him. But we can cuss and fight each other, but we don't like other people talking bad about them. It's just one of those old hillbilly rules out here. So he turns around to this dark object up on the cliff above him, and he lets out a bunch of cuss words at the person, and says, "Who the and give you permission to be on this property?" He said the person, what he thought was a person at first, squatted down on his haunches and looked over at him, looked over that wall, and growled at him with a deep guttural. He said, "Doug, my fish and my fishing pole are still down there in that strip pit. I ran off and left them." He said that is the truth. He said everybody knows what roams these hills out here. He said, and these people's got a lot of cattle. They're cattlemen, what they are. He said, we know what's out there. We don't go out there in the dark.
And speaking of cattle, I just want everybody to know that when I first went there to Bullett's place, my main goal was to just investigate the area and corroborate some of his stories with neighbors and such. And, of course, we're talking about cattle kills and things like that. So I contacted a neighbor, not a next-door neighbor, but a landowner in that area who actually lives in Tulsa, and asked him if he had any of his cattle predicted. And he said just that year, which was 2006, I think it was in the fall of 2006 when I called him, he said just that year they had 6 steer taken by predators. And he, of course, was saying that he thinks it's a mountain lion. Said he has caves on his property and thinks that maybe mountain lions are using the caves on his property. So I'd actually like to go to that gentleman's property too. But also, in light of that, talking to other people, I have been to the meat locker, in the fall when they're butchering a lot of deer meat and things like that to get scraps to use as bait. And the owner of the meat locker, I don't hide the fact why I'm there. Matter of fact, Bullitt is the one who sent me there to get the scraps. And I talked to the gentleman about what was going on and told him about deer being found up in the tree. And I had a gentleman who was dropping off a deer from the area tell me. He says, it's funny that you say that. He said, because I have myself have found a deer up in the tree 15, 20 feet high before. So this guy, here he is bringing in corroborating evidence that there's something going on. And mountain lions might take them up in the tree. I mean, I'm thinking more of a jaguar cat is the kind of cat that drags their prey up in the tree. But, it could be a mountain lion. I mean, I'm not sure. But also in a local restaurant, I was talking to a lady that worked there, and I told her why I was there, and, of course, she was fascinated. And she said she grew up in Winganon, which is just a few miles from Bullett's place. And she says when I was growing up, she said my brothers will always talk about the Winganon monster. And she says, now I know that, it might have been a Bigfoot. So there's plenty of stories to go around in that area, and Bullett just happens to be a lucky one that's been paying attention for the past 22 years.
Absolutely, Randy, and that's the thing. Most people will not tell you these stories unless they know you're interested or you are a longtime resident. Even though I've been out here 22 years, I'm still considered the new kid on the block. I'm finding out more and more and more secondhand stories that I know these people personally that's had these sightings, and they are now coming forward to me and telling me these stories. I'd like to comment on what Randy said a while ago, though, and that is a mountain lion does not drag its prey into the trees. A mountain lion always kills and eats the victim on the ground, and once it's had its fill, it covers the victim up, the animal up, with leaves and twigs and dirt, and then it goes off to a distance and digests the food, but it keeps its eye on that prey that it's buried, and it will keep coming back until it has consumed the animal to the point of there's just scavenger meat left. I would also like to make a note. There was other people on other sites that had berated us, made fun of us about that story of the animals being up in the fork of trees. That no such creature could do that. And this gentleman that Randy was talking about, that has this property across the road from me, the other people, there was a naysayer, said, well, there's no animal that can put a deer in the tree. Well, the correct version of that story was these were not deer in the tree, they were cows in the tree, 600 and 800-pound cows up in those trees, in the fork of the trees. So that was a correction that a lot of those people misunderstood or just blatantly disregarded the true facts.
And you know what's interesting? This gentleman told me he wasn't very high up in the tree. He just said it was in a fork that was about 8 or 10 foot off the ground, which to me would be about shoulder height to a good-sized Bigfoot.
Absolutely, Randy, absolutely. And the fact that, you know, yes, we have found parts of deer in the fork of trees, but I don't have cattle. I don't raise cattle. I just raise Bigfoots, it seems like. but this gentleman was saying they were regular full-grown cattle up in the fork of these trees. So that kind of coincides with what we've been talking about all along. Again, we have found deer, a hind section, a leg, etc., in a tree, but in this situation, these were full-grown 600, 800-pound cattle. So that had to take some really good strength to heave one of those up there. I'm playing Randy's recording, which was taken down on my property, down at Spencer's Creek, of an actual Bigfoot that's approaching his coffin. Now, if you guys don't know what his coffin is, I nicknamed that trailer of his a coffin because he gets in that thing and stays all night. And I told him, that will make a nice coffin when I find your body in the morning. so the name is sort of stuck.
Wait, we also need to clarify this. I mean, there's no degree of certainty that we can say that was a Bigfoot that screamed in this recording. There's actually two different sounds in the same recording, but you know, if you put two and two together with what's going on there and what we hear sometimes at nights with rock clacking and wood knocks and the screams and such, there's a good indication that this is something not quite discovered yet. But, you know, just to be safe, we can't say for sure that it is one, but, you know, we know it probably is.
Absolutely, and I've been around these things for 22 years. I can unequivocally say it was a Bigfoot or it was a guy with a death wish, one of the two.
I have had many people listen to that, and other Bigfoot researchers listen to that and ask them, you tell me what animal would make this sound, and every hunter that has listened to that says, I have never heard that before. I do not know. And I have had a researcher tell me that one of the calls in there was a locator call, because that particular night I had heard at least 20 to 25 of those same calls throughout the area, throughout those bottoms areas. And what I heard was I would hear that call in the distance, and then I would hear it up close, and I would hear it somewhere else, and I spent the whole night listening to these calls, and I was thinking it was the same animal that was doing some serious moving around. But another researcher brought it to my attention that there was not one animal there. There were many animals, and they were located all over the place using these locator calls. And that kind of unnerved me a little bit, because I really don't know. You know, I'm not that afraid of one, but the idea of 10 or 15 of them suckers around just kind of gives you the willies.
Absolutely.
I even think it was like pit bulls pulling you apart. These things would not have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I give a report of the hunt at Spencer's Creek, and that particular night we saw seven Bigfoots in one night. So yes, I'm very much agree that these creatures. You see one, and there's another one around there somewhere. Maybe six more on top of that. But I play Randy's sound at the beginning of the tape. I describe it so that the uninitiated listener will know what it is when they're hearing it, because they may think it's me drinking moonshine, screaming. but you definitely, by playing it over several times, the first to the educated Bigfoot hunter, you will automatically, you hear the stream, the creek running in the background. You hear a couple of coon dogs way off barking, and then you hear this creature as it's walking through the brush. You can actually hear his footsteps. He is walking on two legs, and then it sounds like he's right outside of Randy's coffin, and he beats a couple of tree knocks, and then he screams that blood-curdling scream that cannot be imitated by a human voice.
And I can tell you, the recording does not do justice to that second scream. The first scream was the locator call. It was just a short whoop. But the second scream was very loud. And when I was in that trailer, I keep it pitch dark. So here I am in this little dark box, completely blacked out. And all I'm sitting there is with my parabolic microphone. And when this thing screamed, I jumped because I tell you, I squirted out an egg, and it was that scary. And I didn't even know till after we listened to the recording the next day that there was a real quick knock right before the scream. I didn't even hear that part because the scream had me so overwhelmed.
Yeah, I listened to it just practically every day, and I could hear those pre-knocks before that scream. In fact, there was a couple of softer knocks before those three knocks that sound like it was a little further back. So there was more than one there that night. It's a very good tape to play in the pitch dark. Turn out your lights in your house or go sit in the woods and put that scream on full volume. It will make you scared, I guarantee you. Yeah, I know what you were doing. You were thinking about playing that outside in the woods. It will definitely give you goosebumps. And I guarantee you, it would be an excellent tape for Halloween night at some camp with little kids or adults, because it will put the goosebumps up and down you.
Yeah, I tell you what's got me going right now, and I'm occasionally zoning off thinking about it, and I'm just thinking about my next trip there. I absolutely cannot wait. Well,
I've got two of these deer hunters from last year, for 2006. When I say last year, I mean 2006, because we had just finished up the deer season for 2007. So to me, it's still 2007. I'm not even used to writing 2008 yet on my bad checks. But these two gentlemen, Ernie and Ken. What happened there in 2006, and I've told Randy this, I've had equal amount of sightings in broad daylight as I have at night. So it seems like they pick up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I've had a lot of encounters over the last 22 years around that time frame from 3 o'clock in the afternoon on. But anyhow, 2006, this creature was up here by my house on the south side of the house. I have a tower stand 1, a 1.5, and tower stand number 2. These are 16-foot tower stands, totally enclosed. And this creature, which I knew was a Bigfoot, was broad daylight up here. Now, I'm going to try to imitate his sound. So everybody out there kind of cut me some slack, but it sounded between the sound of a jackass donkey and a squeaky pump and a peacock on steroids, I guess you'd say. But But here's the sound that this creature made. Could you hear that very good?
Yes.
Could you hear that?
Yes, I heard it.
Okay, that's my best imitation of it. Now, this thing, of course, was humongous volume, humongous lung capacity, and I knew eventually that one of the hunters was going to get to see this thing. So what I did, I parked in my mule, Kawasaki mule, on the extreme western edge of the property, because I knew this thing was out here in the daytime. Now, I don't know why it was out here in the daytime, and I don't know why it kept screaming. There was something about it. He ran all over the property over here in this little old 15-acre beside the house. It's about a 15, 20-acre parcel here beside the house, thickly wooded, and he had taken up residence in the daytime. Now, there's theories behind it, but I think what he was doing, he was trying to call up a mate. You know, I've seen little Bigfoots out here, so as far as I know, it was their mating call. I have no idea. But what happened, this thing kept on doing this, and my grandson, Eric, he spent the night with Papa, and we have a fifth-wheel trailer beside the house, and I've got it plugged into the outlets, and we've got TV and a toilet, and it's real comfy. And when we first bought that fifth wheel, me and the wife was spending a few nights in it, and we felt the trailer being pushed. And every time I'd get up and look out the window, I wouldn't see anything. Occasionally, I would see a black form, like a shadow, running across the yard, a fairly good-sized shadow. So anyhow, this particular night, I woke up and my grandson was sleeping in the living room on the couch. And I said, Eric, didn't you like your bunk beds? Yeah, Papa, but the creature looked in the window at me. I said, well, why didn't you wake me up? He said, I was too scared to move. I said, well, what was he doing? He said he was tapping on the trailer. He was walking around the trailer and tapping on it with his fingernails. And he said, then he tapped on my window, and I looked at him, and he was smiling at me. And he said it was like a big grin showing his teeth. And he said, I got scared and come in here. And I said, well, next time you wake Papa up. Papa sleeps with a big pistol. I had him to draw me a picture of what he saw. Of course, you know, this is a little teen. You know, I think he was, Eric was 11 years old at the time. He's 13 now, but it freaked him out real bad. And to this day, I've got his PlayStation 3, well, my PlayStation 3. That's why he comes to stay with Papa. He wants to play my PlayStation 3. And it's set up out there in that fifth wheel. So he'll go out there and play that PlayStation 3 as long as the sun's up. But when it gets dark, he wants me to be with him.
And I just want everybody to know, when Bullet says that something pushes the trailer and he gets up and goes to the door and doesn't say anything, you can read a book in how long it takes him to get to the door.
Yeah, I'm not the fastest anymore, that's for sure. But to finish this story up, what happened was, remember I told you that this creature, this Bigfoot, was roaming around in broad daylight, screaming and bellowing. That's Saturday morning. It was Friday night when this happened. Saturday morning, Eric wanted to come to the house, so I got up with him, and we heard the creature now. This is 8:30 in the morning, right down the driveway between the blacktop road, about 150 yards middle of that driveway. We heard him scream again. And Eric got scared. He says, come on, Papa, let's go. I said, okay, Eric. So we come in the house. I grabbed my big buffalo rifle. I went back out, but I didn't see him. But anyhow, about 2 days later, my two deer hunters, Ken and Ernie, saw him. They saw the creature, and it scared the crap out of them. And they started to quit the lease because they never realized anything like that happened.
And I talked to Eric about his sighting out there and trying to get some more details out of him. And he was tight-lipped about it even then, and he just basically said that it was too close to dark. He didn't want to talk about it when it was that close to dark because it makes him think about it, and he doesn't want to think about it, especially after dark.
Absolutely. I have a lot of Bigfoot movies here at the house, like everybody else has. And one thing Eric will tell me when he comes out to spend the weekend with Papa, first thing he says is, "Papa, we're not going to watch no Bigfoot stories when it gets close to dark." I said, "Okay, I won't put any on." So he's still freaked out over that incident. Ken and Ernie, they got a kick out of it after they got over being scared to death. The thing walked right by them. They thought it was me and my mule. And Ken had called me at 8:30 in the morning and said he had a cell phone and he was out there in the woods deer hunting. And he said, "Yeah, Doug, what do you want?" I said, "What do you mean what I want?" "Well, you went by me here just a while ago, on your mule." I said, No, I'm not on my mule. I'm here at the house. I'm just now getting out of bed. I didn't go hunting." And I said, "What color was this mule?" And he said, "Black." And I said, "Okay, my mule is green." I said, "What does a mountain gorilla look like when it's walking on all fours?" And he goes, "Oh, my God." He said, "You're freaking me out. You're freaking me out." And I said, "Did you hear the motor running or anything?" No. He said, "It was quiet." I said, "Which way to go?" And he said, "It went west." And I said, "Well, Ken, if it went west, it's going to that 130-foot cliff." And he says, "Oh, my God, you're freaking me out. That's where it went, Doug." And Ernie, the other hunter, he said he saw it. He said, "Yeah, you might describe it as a mountain gorilla, from the back." But it freaked them both out. And but I've got tons and tons of stories like that. And again, I don't want people to get the impression that this has all been from 2 or 3 years. This is 22 years of it. And I've even got stories that I've never even written down. But Randy insisted, and it was a good thing he did, that I need to put all this down on disc or tape or something. So for posterity reasons, it won't be lost, I said, "Yeah, it's a good idea," so that's what I started doing. But Randy and Darren are both witnesses. They have seen stuff out here, and there are creatures running around.
Was it Old Man Bible, talking about the screaming pigs?
Oh yeah, there's a gentleman. He's passed on, Lloyd Bible. He's one of the old mountain men out here, and really a unique person. Lloyd had given me education deluxe by actually confiding in me all of the aspects, the mysterious areas, the things out in this area. So many people today don't pay attention to their surroundings, but old Lloyd, he was at the time was 78 years old, and I would see him walking through the woods over here, barefoot sometimes. He was a crusty old soul, a true mountain man, and Lloyd told me lots of interesting stories, and he would come and visit me about once a week. The wife always had coffee made, and we'd have a big apple pie or something. He had a sweet tooth. He loved apple pies. But anyhow, Lloyd sat down to visit, and I said, "Lloyd, what type of creatures actually run around out here in these woods?" He said, "Well, boy," he said, there's a lot of things you wouldn't believe." He said, "Well, there's creatures that nobody knows about. They wouldn't believe you if you told them." And I said, "Well, Lloyd, what are some of them?" He said, "There's a big old red boar, had 16-inch double curl tusk." He said, "It was eating our calves, so we had to ride it down on horseback and shoot and kill it. Weighed 600 pounds. It had eaten about 8 of my calves over the years, and gored 2 or 3 of my horses when we tried to kill it." And I said, "Okay, then what's some of the other stories?" I'm trying to get him around the Bigfoot, and he's telling me all these other stories. And I said, "Well, well, have you ever seen anything? Have you ever seen a Bigfoot? He said, a what? What is it? And I said, a Bigfoot. It's a hairy-looking man that walks on two legs. He said, oh, yeah. He said, we call them squealing pigs. I said, squealing pigs? And he said, yeah, I was working on my tractor off the cliff, off the high wall behind you. The carburetor was all gonked out, and I was cleaning it out one morning. He said, it was just at sun up. The sun was just coming up. And he said, I'm being pelted by rocks, little pebbles and rocks hitting the ground around me. He said, I look back over my shoulder up on your cliffs, and he said, there's 6 or 8 of these little monkey-looking creatures jumping up and down and slinging rocks at me and squealing like a pig. So henceforth, we call them squealing pigs. You know, he had stories like that. And I said, well, did you ever see any big ones? Oh, yeah. He said, I once seen a bear down there behind you, a big old cinnamon-colored bear eating those berries. He said the thing walked off on 2 legs and just kept on walking. The strangest thing about it was he didn't walk like a bear. He walked like a man. And I said, well, that's what we call a Bigfoot now. And I said, you say he was cinnamon-colored. He said, well, he looks cinnamon-colored to me, boy. You know, and I said, well, and
it's just hard for me to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine you being a boy to anybody.
Yeah. Well, Lloyd was a crusty old guy, and he's definitely missed. He passed away, 3 years ago now, and he was 80 in his late 80s when he passed away, and the guy could just sit there and walk and talk with the best of them. He was from the old school, and he was definitely born 100 years too late. And I had a lot of stories. I had Lloyd recorded. Lloyd was, his mother was the first cousins to the Dalton gang. And he told me lots of stories of the Daltons coming up these hills to recuperate from gunshots and whatnot. Anyhow, Lloyd told me that the Daltons come up here, and they always hid out for 4 or 5 days, and then they'd leave. They didn't like his dad. They didn't like Lloyd's dad, so his dad never went outside the house because they would have killed him. But Lloyd's mother was their first cousin. But anyhow, there's lots and lots of stories out here. Cherokee Corner, Tick Eaters, et cetera, et cetera. And Tick Eaters was an Indian family that lived out here forever. And all their grave markers are still out here. And they've all been acquainted with Bigfoot. The Bigfoot is not a phenomenon that just happened. Bigfoot out here has been forever. All these people out here are like second and third generations. Most of them's great grandparents and grandparents coming before the land rush. So it's quite a historical area. Actually, it's a minefield full of stories, historical, insignificant maybe to some people, but nevertheless some great stories out here. And I was blessed in meeting Lloyd, and I recorded him with a small recorder at his permission. He didn't know what it was. He gave me permission to record him. And then, of course, our house burnt to the ground back in 96, I think it was 1996. And I lost all of those stories, but I've got them in my head, and I'll be putting those down too. Yes, it was the grandson that told me the story of him being in the strip pit when the Bigfoot came up on top of him. He thought it was a trespasser. That was Lloyd's grandson. And there's lots of stories. Lloyd one time witnessed a big mountain lion. Lloyd always had 5 or 6 big, curly junkyard dogs that was with him all the time. Lloyd was always by himself down in them bottoms, but he always got out at dark. And he went down there one morning and witnessed a huge mountain lion. Had one of his hogs that weighed 150 pounds, and he had it in his jaw, and he was walking away with this dead hog. Lloyd's dogs took out, after that mountain lion, the mountain lion dropped the hog and took out running. But he came up and got me, and I went down there with his huge tracks. He wanted me to sit down there in a tree at night and kill that mountain lion. I said, no way, I ain't that brave.
Wow. There was some gifts left behind Bullet's house one time, and they were laid side by side, a bluebird, a cardinal, and a turtle shell. Maybe not in that order, but they were all three together, dead with no damage to them. They just were dead still, and they weren't ruffled, they weren't featherless, they were just complete birds lying there dead. And there was another instance where a squirrel was left on the steps of his camper with a head ripped off, and he knew it was ripped off instead of cut off because of the stringy innards still hanging on the neck, and his bulldog at the time would not touch it, would not even go near it, even though that bulldog has eaten everything that ever came into the yard that was smaller than it. And another instance, when I was there, we saw a dead squirrel hanging in the tree behind the camper about 10 foot off the ground. And those are at least three that I know of.
Yeah, the gift, I call it the gifts. There were outside my bedroom window was that red cardinal, and then a box turtle, and then a blue jay in that order. And I inspected them, and there was no markings on them whatsoever. It was as if they had just died of fright. They were fully intact. They weren't rotted. They were rather fresh because the birds, when I picked them up, were limber. So these things had been killed that morning or had been gathered up. It was a red cardinal, box turtle, and a blue jay, and that was very, very mysterious.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the interview as it was recorded. And but I do want to address, especially at the beginning of this interview, where almost every time I mentioned these wild people, I called them animals. You got to understand, this interview took place in 2008. Only 2 years after my encounter at the Chickasaw Park. So, I mean, of course, you can go back and watch that video of my Chickasaw Park encounter, but that was the beginning. That was really the beginning. So I didn't know much more at this point. I was still, you know, trying to learn things from other people. And yeah, I had a long way to go. I still got a long way to go. But here we are. We keep churning these things out and keep trying to put information in the old brain pan and see if we can't get some solid answers. But I do apologize. I called them animals probably 100 times in this interview. That's not my thought processes now. But it's my understanding that if you're the same person that you were 20 years ago, then you've wasted 20 years of your life. So everybody should be subject to change your mind, change your mindset. If I see anybody who's the same as they were 20 years ago, then I wonder just how open they are to learning. So, okay, here we go. I appreciate you guys. Please subscribe and share if possible, and certainly like the video. I'm doing all I can, working hard. It's nice and hot, and I'm planning trips, and so I'm trying to put out some quality videos. I hope you guys appreciate it. Thank you. Goodbye.